All right, we are recording. I am here with my boy Coop. What's up, my bro?
Not much. We're rolling into what's looks like it's going to be a great summer.
It
Actually, pretty
yeah,
early start.
yeah, it's not looking too bad. And Adam Patrick, my man, as always. How are you doing, man?
What's up, fellas? How's everyone doing?
Good.
All good. All good. I was just talking about you the other day. So
Me?
yeah, you.
Oh, shoot, man. You got to get
Yeah.
more important stuff to do. You must be bored.
No, well, I had Jason on, and we were talking about kind of our like little group of like podcasters, and I
Oh,
was
okay.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
out of all of us, like just my perspective, out of all of us, whether Matthew Erickson, Jason, Buck, myself, out of all of us, you're the smartest. You're definitely the smartest of all of us.
Well, that has to
So
mean I'm everything else I'm the worst at then. That's got to
you
be that's the balance.
you may be worse at everything else, but you are
I think that's
definitely.
probably
Yeah, you're definitely the most researched. You definitely have like the most knowledge and understanding than all of
probably why
us.
people think I'm the most annoying too. It's probably pedantic, stupid semantical
Well,
arguments and stuff.
I'm not gonna get
Listen,
into
I appreciate
why I'm not gonna get into why people think you're annoying. Like I was trying to be complimentary, and you just turn it all
I'll
around.
take the compliment. Thank you. I'll take the compliment.
All right. So
We have to we have to establish one thing first. I do not use terms that are not readily accessible to everybody
right.
Okay.
in discussing things.
That
Yeah, I
is
think we'll be good.
true. That is true. But I think Adam's going to be okay. I
Yeah, I
think,
think we'll be
and
good.
that's
Whatever.
why I wanted you two to talk to each other, because I think out of all the people I know that Coop could talk to, and Matthew Erickson was a really fun conversation to have with Coop. But I think out of all the people I know, like Adam is going to be the most on your level, Coop, that's able to really like keep up with kind of where you're going um through philosophy, and kind of follow you through this lineage of thought, if that makes any
All right,
sense.
I'll take that as a compliment. As you said he was the smartest amongst a group of people,
Also,
and
I
Yeah,
didn't realize you talked to if you talk to Matt, then you should have a pretty good starting point maybe for some of the things that I would come
yeah,
at it with. Because
you listen to that podcast. We've talked about it, the podcast on myth that he did with Matt.
I did. I
Yeah.
did, but that was a while ago in
Yeah,
my short
it
term
was a couple of
memory.
years ago, but yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah,
But I
yeah.
remember doing it. Yeah. A lot's happened since then. So maybe we'll see where maybe I've changed a whole bunch too. Who knows?
Yeah.
yeah, Matt's a good guy.
So
Matt's a good guy.
so Coop, let's start with you if you don't mind. Let's kind of lay down a foundation of what the conversation is. What are we talking about here?
Well, I see that there's a divide in the way. Well, it's so hard to coin this, so I'll just use a bunch of words that generally uh, get a philosophical bent into one bracket. The traditional conservative, right-leaning individuals. I think that there's a divide between the various religious traditions in approaching small c conservatism and the kind of an atheist or agnostic aspect of it, which is more represented by Nietzschean sense of materialism, not the socialist sense of materialism. Or
Can I ask
anything.
you a question real quick? Because
Yeah.
like so one of the things that people are going to have an issue with going into this conversation, and I didn't think about it until you just mentioned that just now. One of the things that people are going to have an issue with is imagining that there is an atheist view from a conservative lens. Can you kind of explain that?
Well, yes. Um, a person can recognize the value of family and all of the things that are traditional and reject instinctually what one would religiously consider degeneracy, simply on an instinctual level, as I believe such behaviors are, you know, in a gut feeling sense, the result of some aberrant action or abuse or societal input that has perverted the individual's natural positive growth. In other words, if they were left alone to be as they would be, then they would not engage in such perversions. So, from an atheistic sense, if a family unit is a healthy family unit and they raise healthy children, then acts of degeneracy outside of negative influence, right, would be felt at a gut level and therefore not engaged in. So a certain sense of instinctual morality as opposed to a morality that is based upon an edict from a higher power, right? Like, to a certain extent, I can simply say I'm sure that Neanderthals had absolutely no moral compunction against rape, right? But I don't think that they had the same instinctual sense of humanity that Homo sapiens did, and that was part and parcel to why we were able to outcompete them. Just as a loose example.
Right. Okay.
And this is, of course, previous to any conception of religion or God as we know it today, right? So you have to have that basic sense of morality for mankind to even develop societies up to the point of developed religion, or else they simply would not have been able to develop such.
Let me just apologize ahead of time right now. I'm going on 7 days, no cigarettes. So I'm coughing up a bunch of stuff.
Good for you.
Yeah,
no,
right.
Good, Tommy.
And so I'm coughing up my lungs as we speak. So I'm going to continue to mute my microphone. So if I kind of drop out, it's not because I'm not interested about the conversation or engaged in the conversation. It's just because I'm probably like hacking up a lung, trying to get my lungs to heal a little bit. I should have said that at the beginning.
That's good. I quit at the end of March. I feel great.
Yeah. Well, good for you, man. Yeah, I'm 7 days in, and I'm using some a nicotine pouch just to help take the edge off, and keep me from like really like going after nicotine. So the smoking's not that bad as long as I have that kind of like I'm kind of curbing that edge,
Right.
of needing that nicotine.
I didn't use any patch. I didn't use any patch or anything like that.
I know. I'm a pussy.
I just started going out of my way trying to find people to tell the fuck off.
Well, you work in a nursing home, so most of those people probably don't remember who you are.
So anyway, where were we? I was talking about so the atheist concept of conservatism is based upon a natural instinct towards moral behaviors, as opposed to one that is an edict-based source of morals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do you want me to go?
Sure.
So it's probably a good idea from the start there to talk about or maybe not push back, but have you maybe illuminate me a little bit on what you mean by some of the sort of assumptions that were baked into that. Sure. Things like a morality existing pre-religion, or things that Neanderthals would or wouldn't do. Or
I'd rather avoid the Neanderthal thing, but we can talk about pre-Christian morals.
Okay, well, I mean that's like
we actually have some kind of record of that, whereas we don't really have any record of Neanderthal interaction.
Right. Oh yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we could definitely do that. I mean, and then I would just say, by quote unquote Christian, where would you draw the line of pre and post Christian? Like, is there a date or a year or a biblical part, or like you said prior to Christianity? So where would Christianity begin?
Well, this is where history becomes really confusing to the argument, right? Because I would suggest that Christianity, the various religions of Christianity started in development long before the advent of Christ, and that the religious structures themselves were a shoe that was already existing that adapted to fit this new concept that had come onto the scene. But there had already been the Orphic faiths, right? Where Orpheus was very similar to the concept of Jesus. Tammuz is very similar to the concept of Jesus. In many of the mythos that were extant far before Christ came onto the scene. In Hinduism, you have the Trimurti, which is an exact representation of the Holy Trinity according to Catholicism. So what I'm saying is that if you want me to nail down a beginning of Christianity, you have to.
No, that was good. That's okay. That actually worked out.
I want to know. Yeah, I wanted to know. Yeah, what did you want? Did you want the advent of Christ? And
no, that works. That's what you said.
100 years after his death, when the writings started being compiled and into something that became known as the Bible today. You know, what would you rather work on?
No, I think that's actually really helpful where you went with that, because I think if anyone looks into maybe just the general, would say, I'll use the word Wikipedia as just a generalization. If somebody looks into the Wikipedia article on like Proto-Indo-European or Proto-Indo-Aryan culture,
Mayan culture,
right? Like the Rig Veda, like we're talking about that culture kind of
yes,
moving its way southwest, kind of through what would be like Mesopotamia area into
yes,
Egypt, and then the like Memphite metaphysics working itself maybe
yes,
up into like the Mesopotamia
and
area.
the origin of the concept of a sky god being worshipped by the Mayan culture as well.
Yes, right. And the funny thing, if anybody like looks up the Sky Father phonetics on something like Wikipedia, they'll see like little numbers in the words, like a little 2 and like a little 1 to like, yeah. So, all right, perfect. So what I would say there, and this is just coming from like presuppositional apologetics or argumentation outside of there being a Christian concept involved, that I think we could, and I don't, maybe we won't do this, but I think we could fall into the genetic fallacy there of saying that just because something is similar or something predates something else, that those two things are related in any way. Now, I'm not saying they're not related in any way or that one doesn't come from the other, but I do think we could fall into the genetic fallacy or the word concept fallacy of things that, for example, seem like a virgin birth that is baked into Ramses II's Memphite cosmology,
and the Buddha,
being, or that, whatever it is. And then somebody would say, well, Christianity, the concept of the Trinity, the concept of the virgin birth, Christ, Savior, it's just that, but it's in a new form. I think that's an interesting concept. I mean, I would not say that anyone could show or demonstrate that is true, that one comes from the other. It would be a presupposition going in. Like one person, not saying you're doing this, but somebody would say, I'm going to start with the assumption that is an accurate statement. And somebody else would say, well, I'm going to start with the assumption it's an inaccurate statement, but neither one of those is demonstrably provable against the other. So I'm just wondering, is that the presup that we're coming into this with? And then I'll know how to work on it.
I can work on a presupposition that concepts, ideas, structures, institutions, all of these things, right, that develop have an evolutionary aspect to them, right?
Can I ask one favor from both of y'all? Because I'm worried a little bit as a person listening to the podcast. Sometimes the guests get caught up in the weeds a little bit. I just want to make sure that everybody listening understands what a presupposition is. So if you wouldn't mind, both of you kind of giving your own definition of a presupposition, making it a little bit easier for people to follow what you're talking about when you're talking about presuppositions.
What we're establishing, Tommy, is how much of what we're talking about is assumed so that we can move together forward from a point of mutual assumption.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So that's a good definition for people to follow when they're following the conversation.
A good example for the audience would be, so if the audience is listening, they're wondering, like, in order for us to have a conversation right now, the three of us, we have to assume we all speak the same language, we all have an internet connection, we all have the ability to hear and speak microphone, right? There's all of these things that are baked into the possibility of this conversation happening. If any of those things weren't the case, then we would not be able to achieve what we're achieving right now. So,
so you presuppose that all these things exist for the conversation to move forward,
or we don't, right? It's just we're trying to figure out which worldview and which presuppositions or assumptions, as Coop said, are baked into that worldview in order to kind of demonstrate where it would logically end up. Like if you have, and I get that we're maybe going to be fluid and we'll learn and grow over time. We're not static in our thinking. I understand that. But you kind of have to be assumed.
Both of you have to realize y'all are both smarter than 95% of the people that are listening to this. So like, I'm going to have to interrupt for small little bullshit like this.
Please do.
Just to keep people on track with what they're listening to.
Yeah.
Please do. Please do.
Okay.
I'm just glad to be talking to somebody that isn't drooling.
Well, I'm drooling, but I'm trying not to talk as much as I do.
But yeah, I think.
All right, well, continue where y'all are at. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
The concept that of like does not mean the same is what you're getting at, from what I understand, which means that just because there are conceptualizations of virgin birth and connectivity and relationships between a father, a mother, and a son, and that they form some type of union as being common across all cultures, I can understand that. But what I do see is that larger institutions are created as an evolutionary process of recognition of commonality, and then the concretization of those things into institutions. And so that all of those things as a recognizable forming base for creating an institution, a religious institution, would be noted and utilized in order to create one that you would want to spread across the world, right? So that is a presupposition that I have, is that in the formation of that, and considering the expanse of the empire and understanding of the world at that time, that all of those commonalities were taken into consideration in the formation of the new religion, which would subsume the role that the disparate pagan religions had throughout the world, and do so in a more economical fashion.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I have to assume here, but and please correct me if I'm wrong, that when you say Christian, maybe you should let me in on how much Christian you mean. Is it Roman Catholic Christian? Is it Lutheran denominations that have rainbow flags outside their front door? Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about deism, like the founders?
No, if you really want to go to the roots, if I was going to ascribe to Christianity, I'd be more Coptic than anything else. Okay. I would be on the other side of the Arian heresy.
Okay. Yeah. So it would subordinationism of Christ to a creature. Right?
I would be very basic fundamentals of biblical scripture, and I would be stripping away everything that the Bible does not give license to.
Okay. Let me ask on the Coptic side there. So we're going on the other side of the Arian controversy. We're talking about Christ as a creature, or somehow infused with the Spirit of God, but he's still a man. Kind of. That's what we're talking about.
Very much a man, and said so many times.
Gotcha. Okay, and so we're basically disregarding any ecumenical council that the Roman Catholic or the Orthodox Church would post Ephesus.
Let's put it this way. I don't want to talk about that because I'm not adopting Christianity.
I understand. Well, it's important because
I would say if I was going to, all I'm saying is that if I was going to come at Christianity from an angle and just criticize Christianity from inside Christianity, that is the angle that I would come at.
Okay.
However, I'm not here to criticize Christianity. Right.
I think it's more. I think what I'm hearing more is there a Christian? Is there something within a Christian worldview that can be utilized in the tool belt of a higher movement toward some kind of fighting the current regime, and then basing that?
I'm saying that it's. I'm saying that there isn't that much, to be honest, and that's why I want some pushback from you. The one thing that I do see in an understanding of God as having a very good relevant point, which I can say I can refute, but for the layperson, just simply seeking an easy or simple explanation or rationale that they can utilize God as a moral authority existing as a rule above all others, so that it's not just a matter of an individual's subjective perspective on whether or not they think something is right or wrong, is a great tool. It's a great thing. I can understand the appeal to that, and I can understand the appeal to a social forum for that, right? But I think that there are a lot more detrimental things to the religious mindset, right, that have allowed for the world to become as debauched as it is.
Can I kind of move this in a slightly different direction, because I think it might get to what we're trying to get to right now?
Well, actually, can I just respond to that real quick? Because I think.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
It's going to be an important response. I 100% agree with everything you just said. If a human being is relying on a supernatural entity to impart some sort of morality onto them, or it's a reflection of some rational view of the world that needs to be extrapolated upwards or like induced upwards, I think that is silly. And so I would agree with you. And also, I think the institutions, especially where we come from in the West, West Enlightenment tradition, the Western scholastic tradition, I think all of that stuff is horseshit. I really do. And I think that there's a reason why modern day secular humanists or atheists or whatever they want to call themselves, why they make fun of such things, because they're ridiculous. And it's easy to make fun of things that are ridiculous. And I think we all kind of know instinctively when something's ridiculous. And that is why I spent 20 plus years, I wouldn't say rebelling against Western Christianity, but essentially dismissing it as retarded, which it is. And so I think that there's probably a lot more commonality we would have in moving past something like that. We could get into why it's ridiculous, but we probably don't have to. We probably would agree why it is. And I'm not sure that there is anything useful in that worldview, other than pacifying the intellect or not allowing people to think for themselves. And what's strange about that is the whole idea of medieval scholasticism was to elevate rationality to the God level status, which of course is the thing that ultimately undermined their entire system. So Roman Catholicism, Vatican, specifically the Roman Church, was the downfall of their own existence by the very nature of their choices. And we're still dealing with those choices today. And I see a lot of people who are capital T traditionalists, perennialists, perennial philosophy, people moving in the Nietzschean Heraclitean tradition of the one and flux and change, all really, even Sufism is a big resurgence right now, all looking for kind of an underlying theme that they can tap into that sort of speaks to all of us. I think Western Christianity, Protestant and Roman Catholic alike, it is so far removed from that instinctive human need for something bigger that it becomes its own joke. and I don't think it's useful at all, to be honest with you. So I think we're in agreement there. I hope.
I agree with you. However, there's a premise behind the concept of Christianity itself that Nietzsche hits home with, right? Which is that it breeds a weakness in that everybody is giving over their life and their material and their own choice of behaviors, right, to an edict that is promising them oceanfront property in Arizona. And that throughout the history of religions, it has always been a religion that has been enforced and practiced and pushed upon the lowercase people of nations in order to generate this basically sacrifice your life and your time, right? And any prospect or will that you might have to empower yourself in order to gain treasures in heaven. And that's true in Buddhism, with the desire being the focal point of something that you have to overcome in order to gain nirvana. It is the same in the Hindu caste system, where there's no point in trying to alleviate yourself above your station. It's true in give unto Caesar Caesar's things and build up your treasures in heaven. It's all just a message of be weak in this life and let rulers rule. And when you kick the bucket, you're going to get some wonderful reward. And that is what allows the corruption of the world to continue. It's because people are happy accepting that fairy tale.
Okay. No, that's that. I would say that's probably summing up Nietzsche. I mean, I tend to err on the side of Nietzsche really just being Heraclitus in modern times. I think
I see him more of as being Diogenes in modern times.
Diogenes Laertius or Laertius, whatever this name is. Is that who you're talking about?
Diogenes.
Laertius or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, maybe. I don't think he was an atheist. I mean, I don't think anyone can demonstrate Nietzsche was a quote atheist. I mean, I think he definitely had a supernatural bent to him for sure. If you say just anti-Christian God, I mean, obviously.
Well, what he stated was that the well, to use his term, the will to power, right, that was evidenced in the pagan gods was more of a reflection of the real grit of life on earth, rather than the spiritual soul bent of Christianity. And that as a result of the innate weakness or the victim mentality that Christianity tend to impart upon people, and that it was okay, and the almost worship of martyrdom, right, was actually a weakness that was preyed upon and encouraged by the elites, to the extent where you can look at Constantine as being both the head of the church that he instituted and the head of the pagan church at the same time, which was one rule for thee, but not for me, so to speak, amongst him and his elite cadre who did not practice Christianity, but in fact held to pagan belief systems because they were more reflective of the power and the ability to maintain and utilize power to control masses who were accepting a submissive religion. And you can say the same about Islam, which simply means to submit. You know, give over everything in this life. It seems to be a common strain in almost every major modern religion that you are to give over everything in this life in order to attain some spiritual promise. And it seems to maintain power structures at B to the point where they can debauch, degenerate the world and the conditions of life for everyone with a relatively free hand.
So, okay, right. So I would definitely question the quote type of Christianity that Nietzsche is encountering when he's making his well, let's also, for the listener, I'm imagining, Tommy, that most of your listeners have not done deep dives into reading Nietzsche. Nietzsche, as Coop knows, does not write treatises. He writes prose fiction novels. Like he's very He's not a, I've never classified him as a philosopher. I understand why
No,
people.
he's an observationalist.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he's not writing a classroom study treatise, is what I'm saying. He's writing in a very
Yeah, he's not prescriptive.
romantic way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's not prescriptive. He's
Right.
not.
Yeah,
He's not like a Stoic philosopher saying this is what you do.
Right. And so there's a lot of
and to be fair, just off the top, Coop is much more of a stoicist than he is a Nietzschean. He is taking a Nietzschean approach, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right, Coop?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. No, I get it. It's
so my Nietzschean view on this is informed by my Stoicism.
Yeah, fair enough. And a lot of people would maybe, not me, but a lot of people would say that Orthodox Christianity in the first, 500 to 600 years AD was, quote, influenced by Stoicism. I think that's another genetic fallacy, but a lot of people would make that because a lot of the same terms are used with Marcus Aurelius and maybe the Gospel according to John. I would see that kind of argument too. The only thing I would say here that might break down a little bit is the idea that there's an underlying order that anyone would be able to know aside from the ability to know itself. For example, without there being some way to demonstrate the possibility of knowledge, there isn't really a way to, quote, know anything. And I don't mean that to sound pedantic. I mean that very specifically. Like,
no, it sounds very sophist.
Yeah, right. So no, it isn't. It isn't sophist, but I get by use like the Dave Smith style of sophist, right? That it's just a circular argument. Yeah. So I'm gonna posit that at a foundational level of every worldview, no matter what it is, Christian, atheist, Buddhist, whatever it is, at a foundational level, there's always going to be circularity, and that is unavoidable. And from that circularity, people develop extrapolations on their worldview. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, I could say as an Orthodox Christian, well, everything comes from God. Seems like a total easy throwaway. Oh, everything comes from God, Adam, right? Like, but I'm not saying this is you. I'm not saying you're an atheist, but the atheist will say, well, I don't need God to know that there's logic and morality and, some of the morality or values, right? I don't need God for that. And we'll say, okay, well, what is morality? It's like, well, I shouldn't XYZ. And the obvious question would be, well, why shouldn't you? And they'll say, well, it's just wrong. Okay, but how do you know that? Well, evolution has taught us that if we do X, Y, or Z, we will, develop this particular way. Well, that's taking where we are now.
Consequentialism.
Yeah. And I don't think that's demonstrable at all. I think it's a presupposition. That's fine. But that's just, I could just easily say it isn't that and be in exactly the same epistemological place that anyone else is. Right. So what I look for is, if we're going to give things like we should, we ought to, we really need to do, I need to understand why I or we ought to, should, or any of that stuff. Like, why should I? Why ought I?
Do you though? Does the average person have to know why in order to do the right thing?
I don't know what the average person needs to do, but just for the sake of this conversation.
Okay. Let me posit that moral actions taken on an instinctual level, right, have resulted in a selection of individuals evolutionarily that have certain personality traits that are inherited by their children that follow through with more moral actions, and that those things develop and create a working society that seems to benefit people based upon those inherited personality traits that lend it towards their survivability and selection to continue into developing a society. And that as a result, it possibly became codified in what we know as moral codes that were institutionalized as religious beliefs.
When you say moral action,
Yes.
What are
So in other
you,
words,
how would you define that in the sense that you're using it there?
well, it would be hashed out by behaviors. So in other words, immoral behaviors would be negative to the tribe. Moral behaviors would be positive for the tribe.
No, I know, but negative and positive in what aspect?
Negative from prospect to survivability at that level.
Okay.
Just survivability of the tribe, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
Survivability, health, the passing on of knowledge, all things necessary at a very basic tribal level, right? The selection would be for those people that were more likely and actually exhibited those positive behaviors than they would be for those that exhibited negative traits. And therefore, their personality, as a result of being individuals who practice these moral behaviors, which is 40 to 60% heritable, would be passed on to their children, right? And
So, for
those that did
example,
not exhibit those that did not exhibit those moral behaviors would be less likely to be selected to pass on their genetic. And therefore, you had the formation of a basic society of moral individuals who had inherited that through personality inheritance through generations. And that as that developed, right, you got a codification because of the expansion of society beyond what is known as the Dunbar threshold, which would be the natural feeling of familial relationships that people can have within a specific group to a larger society. And therefore, it required the codification of these basic inherited moral behaviors in order to keep those larger societies together. And those things became religions.
and so you would say that in this worldview, morality would be objective then.
Morality is an objective thing.
Okay.
Because morality is exhibited through behavior. It's not exhibited through speech. It's not exhibited through concept, right?
Right. So maybe a good example, and the reason I'm doing this is not just to help me understand you, but as Tommy said, we'll have the audience kind of troll along with us. But
Yep.
so I think if we look at what we know of the ancients, pre-classical antiquity, we're looking pre-Thales, right? In basically the whole world, we can see there. Take Hammurabi's code versus the Genesis or the tablets given to Moses at Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
There's whatever version of the word good and version of the word bad that are invoked in both of those situations. Yet they're not used in the same way toward the same ends, toward the same people. So I would,
they certainly are.
Right. So I guess I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I just think that while we could have an objective standard of what is good, what might be good for, and I don't mean this is not to belittle you. It's again, just to maybe help me or the audience, but we could say that Tiny Mustache Man in 1939 in the middle of Europe had a different idea of what was good than Winston Churchill did. Now, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with either of those people. I think they're both crazy people. But even for me just to say that they're crazy people is to invoke some sort of sentiment that has a reference based on the word crazy.
Again, what we're dipping into is relativism, right? And what I'm saying is that what I'm talking about is it's not, but what I'm talking about is not relative, right? It's actually it's actual behaviors with concrete outcomes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And those concrete outcomes are not relative, right?
No, I suppose not.
Not within a tribal group. So in other words, so and so screaming while they're just about to kill their next meal is not subjectively okay based just upon that person's thought of why they screamed, but he's just managed to keep his entire tribe within a meal, right?
Okay.
And
yep.
if he was doing so because he has some type of revenge or vengeance bent against somebody who withheld their daughter from him in marriage, then that would be an immoral thing because he was withholding food from his entire tribe, right? Which at that time might be a good thing. However, maybe he was wrong. Maybe he was promised that daughter in marriage and denied, and therefore subjectively he could be viewed of as being correct in seeking vengeance, right? So that's a subjective thing. But the reality is he does not get to pass on his genes because he had an action that was considered immoral with regards to the general survival of the tribe. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think we're
at that point, there is no authority. There is no authority at that point beyond simple survival, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you that, quote, survival of the tribe is an objective good. I mean, it's a thing that maybe you could say you want, like everybody wants to eat, but I don't know if like maybe if I kill everybody else, I would eat more. And then you say, well, you can't fuck anyone then and have babies that have your instincts. I mean, I could just go to the next village and rape a bunch of women and have a bunch of babies and make everybody think like I do. Right. If it's just survival.
If you could do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's
then you would. It would not necessarily mean that it's the best thing for that tribe, right? Because there would be there would be genetic outcomes to you having sex with all the women of another tribe and killing all the other males, and then what? All of those males would be intermarrying with who? Their sisters?
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering why survival of the tribe matters at all. Like, why do humans need to exist? I mean, there's plenty of species that haven't existed over time. Did they need to or not need to? Like, why do we need to exist?
Why do we need to exist? I'm not entirely sure that we do.
Okay, all right, good.
So I can't make that argument.
Okay, well, then we would agree that, yeah. I mean, that seems to be the logical conclusion, is the assumption that human beings need to exist. I mean, we need to survive.
I'm saying what we have to assume is that human behavior serves a purpose, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure we do have to assume that. I don't think so. Why do we have to assume?
Why wouldn't we assume it? Because it exists, so therefore it has to have a purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a necessity argument, right? Would you say that's kind of human action by Mises? What he's kind of getting at is that maybe. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, humans do act. That's what I'm saying. So that's what we have to comment on, right? So we have to assume that there is a necessity for humanity to see humanity. Otherwise, we can just be nihilist and say, hey, none of this matters. Crack open another beer.
I actually think the logical end game of worldviews like this that I've heard, I've just met you, so I'm not going to part this on you, but the logical outcome of a lot of these worldviews that I've heard that are similar to what I'm hearing you say is there isn't really a reason to do any of these things, right? And I think it's not illogical at all to say that if human beings just were wiped off the face of the earth tomorrow, that everything would just continue on exactly as it had been before. So why ought we not just exacerbate that and end it all right now?
This is perfect. This is what I want. This is what I wanted to hear you say. The reason that you don't think so, right, is because you believe that there's something beyond this existence.
Well, I didn't believe that for 20 years.
But you do believe that now.
I do believe that now, yeah.
Right. So that's why you can say that. Right?
No, but I said that for 20 years. I almost killed myself like multiple times. I mean, there was no reason to keep living or do anything between the ages
and why
when I got out of the military in 2020.
So the question is, why was that? Was it because of an absence of God, or was it because of the influence of a society?
I wouldn't say it had anything to do in my head at that time with a concept of the supernatural, where, and I'll just give you like, this is pretty anecdotal, but I think it's helpful for the conversation maybe, right? Yeah, and obviously I didn't do those things, right? I'm still here. But I had this idea, especially when I got really deep into the libertarian circles in like the mid 20 teens, that there was this idea that, I guess this is kind of Nietzschean in a way, that it's probably whatever, you'll know what philosopher I'm talking about. The idea that you can kind of create your own meaning. And it's Sartre people don't like, right? It's the idea that you can kind of create your own meaning. And I thought when I
think, therefore I am God.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, that's kind of Descartes. I mean, he didn't say the last two words, but that's kind of what I think, therefore I am implies. Right. Yeah. And there's this idea that, that's very freeing. It's very freeing to believe that everything that's in front of me is determined by my choices, and I get to choose, and I get to decide whatever that means to me. And again, this is anecdotal, right? But I found that ultimately in the beginning really pleasing. And then the more I tugged on that string, the more I found it completely empty and meaningless. And I started thinking to myself, well, I really liked this idea prior, and now I really don't like this idea. Like, why do I even have an opinion on this at all? Is it just totally like matter in motion, neurons firing, energy, and like chemicals in the brain? Is it all materialist, whatever, determinism, or is it just all random chaos? And you start thinking about all this stuff. And then you realize if that's the case, if there's nothing but this materialist outlook, then anything goes. Any worldview is just as valid in argumentation as any other worldview. And I could pose that we ought to do a bunch of stuff. And Tommy could say, well, I think we ought to do the opposite of all of those things, Adam. And in the quote marketplace of ideas, we would just see how many people agreed with me and how many people agreed with him. And whoever wins out wins the idea game. And
why do you require that consensus? I'm sorry, I have to interject at a few points because there's like a lot.
Actually, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're what you have to understand is that you're experiencing this in a framework, right? Of a largely Christian sense that you are immersed in.
Sure.
Right. Which is a submissive society that is.
You mean in the West in general?
In general, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not really in the West. Like Buddhism is huge. Islam is huge, right? Hindu K structure is huge, right?
I mean, not really here. But
yeah. No, I'm talking about in the world. Like there are a lot of people that all aspire or all like subscribe to this submissive concept, right?
Can I ask
yeah.
Hey, Coop, can I ask a question real quick? I
Sure.
want to hear kind of both y'all's comment on this, and I think it kind of ties into what you're talking about right now, and maybe it'll help us kind of like put these ideas together. I was curious. I find that those people like myself that have been attracted to libertarianism over the years have found their way into Jungianism. What is it about Jung that is so attractive to those people that are so autonomous in their thinking?
Jung tells a story about individuals seeking freedom from that which they have been immersed in.
Yeah, that's not, it's not far away from Nietzscheanism. Am I correct in that?
It's not that far away from Nietzscheanism. However,
okay.
You have to remember that Nietzsche was that hero's journey was extant a long time before the advent of Christ in mythology, right? And that's why Nietzsche calls upon it in one form or the other. So the question is that Adam, when you were experiencing these things, right? You're experiencing them in a sense of downplaying the value of materialism based upon an imposed presupposition that it was less than something else that you could aspire to. Because we live in a society where being a human being is lesser than what you could be.
No, I didn't.
But that is what's imposed upon all humanity.
No, right? I'm with you on worldviews and paradigms. I understand that we grow up within a perspective, and that our perspective.
You're not good enough. You're not good enough. Be submissive, and eventually you will be good enough. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean that's I would find it very difficult to believe that you could hold everyone to that particular standard. I mean, that's kind of an imposition of that worldview on other worldviews. I do understand there's perspectives. I disagree with that at all. I would completely. I would say that I didn't see, and to be fair with you, I didn't find Orthodox Christianity because of this. It was a completely different reason. And I actually tried to fight it for a long time. But the idea was not that there's like an imposition of this or whatever. It's that the idea that value, no matter how you word what's valuable or good or moral or whatever, if there isn't any supernatural anything anywhere and it's all materialism, then it's just an opinion that can be argued. And that's as far as it could go. You can't ever make it objective. You could say survival instincts, fine, but there's no ought we survive attached to that. So it's always going to be an imposition of something that's circular and unprovable. And that just makes it an argument.
No, the question is, why does there have to be an ought to survive?
Oh, I don't think there can be, is my point.
Right. There just has to be a will to survive.
Yeah, but not everybody has a will to survive.
Well, that's that's proof of the rot that I'm talking about.
Well, I think that if we're going to, I think you are doing this, so I'm going to do it. I think we could flip the coin. We could flip the coin the other way and say that
Sure.
The weird sort of Gnostic, latent Western Christianity, deism or whatever that kind of pervades the underbelly of Western culture is in a lot of ways the thing that keeps people going. I mean, and I think that's just as valid of a way of parsing it out than the opposite. I mean, why not? Why isn't it? Why couldn't you say the reason people keep trudging on is because they feel like there's an other or a perennial philosophy or something somewhere, the one, the Neoplatonic one, whatever, the universe, man, like what that actually keeps people going. Where if they didn't have that, the whole thing, people would just be like, fuck it, we're all right. I mean, you could just easily make that same argument.
So you're saying that it provides like a level of endurance that people wouldn't otherwise have.
I'm saying it could. I'm not saying it does.
I'm saying that it does. Right.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, you can see that it's quite extent in.
I can see that. What do you mean? I can see that?
You can see it. I can say if you want to look at highly religious and faithful societies, right? They're quite often mostly third world countries. Right.
I mean, are you talking about the Orthodox countries in Europe and Russia?
I'm talking about Philippines. I'm talking about Mexico. I'm talking about anywhere where you have high.
Talking about Roman Catholic and Protestant countries.
I'm talking about any country that has less than
Russia?
what would be considered a first world standard.
What about Russia?
I don't know. I think Russia, maybe Russia and China. Russia is edging on first world standard. I think Russia and China are second world standard. But I'm talking about third world nations. So nations, for example, that don't have a large amount of pharmacological resources do tend to have more religious adherence in order to cope with the same stressors. So I'm agreeing with you to a certain extent that religiosity provides succor, right? And the ability to endure through suffering, right? I'm assuming that that's what you were trying to say.
I'm certainly not saying that is a true thing. I'm saying it could be as much of a thing as the opposite of it. But if we're talking about countries that have historically within the dawn, like post Spanish Inquisition, have been kind of conquered by Western imperial powers, then historically they have been imperially subjugated by those powers, whether it's the Spanish crown, Ferdinand and Isabella, or it's the British crown, or it's the Dutch East India Company.
I'm talking about modern times, though.
I mean, they didn't. You still have that, though. I mean, still, like the Roman Catholic influence in Latin America is ridiculously profound right now, and
exactly.
You see
That's
a lot
point.
Of like, yeah, but I'm talking about Orthodox Christian countries like Russia and Eastern Europe, right? That are not those things at all. Okay, and I don't think Russia and the Philippines could be compared as like global powers. I mean, Russia has gone through some stages for sure, and a very large atheist version of it. But
I'm not speaking to the power level of the nation, though. I'm talking about the poverty level of the nation.
Okay.
Right.
So it's and like materialist.
Poverty is directly related to religiosity. So the more impoverished a nation is, generally the more religious they tend to be.
I mean, that's
regardless of what religion.
I mean, that's kind of a correlation, not causation fallacy, isn't it?
No,
I mean,
it's
how would we even
sure.
demonstrate?
I'm not saying it's a causation or a correlation. You can term it whatever. You can argue whatever. It's just simply is, right?
No, I would disagree. It's just simply is. I mean, we can't just say
Well,
stuff like it simply
okay.
is.
Well, okay. Well,
I mean, I can just
either
say it
is
simply
or
isn't.
Okay, and I can say, well, look at you already got you just got finished saying that the effect of and extent of Roman Catholicism in South America is profound, you know.
Yeah.
And there's a correlation between that and poverty.
I don't see how that could be demonstrated. I mean, you could say that
it's also
correlation maybe.
It's also demonstrated in the Philippines, right? And it's nowhere near South America.
I mean, I think before we go off the rails here, I think there's a tendency to impart our worldviews in situations.
I would step in and interrupt this conversation, but I have no idea how to get it back on the rails.
Because... No, I think it's good. I think we're actually we're in a really good spot because
I'm enjoying what you are doing. Like, so I don't want you to feel like we're going like sideways. Everything's fine. Like,
it's just a term, just a phrase that, you know, but
yeah, we're just in a spot where we're disagreeing on like slight terms. But I think from
I'm just trying to make an observation that in nations that are poor, right, there tends to be a higher level of religiosity. I don't want to talk about the historical development of that or anything. I'm just making an observation that seems to be the case.
Well,
right?
what I think is
Western wealthy nations tend to be less religious.
What I think is going to be interesting is
Tommy. I'm sorry. I can't let that go. I mean, I get that you're making an observation, but I mean, it's an observation, and maybe there's correlation to it at the moment. But the wealthiest and most powerful countries historically have been religious countries because all countries have been religious.
I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue that. There's true. I'm talking about right now in this day and age. I'm not talking about 100 years ago or 200 years ago when religion was the rule of the day across the world.
Hold on one second. Let me ask Adam. Because the way the way that Coop has framed that idea, it makes me want to ask Adam something. And it's not because I agree one way or the other. I just want to kind of get Adam's idea on this. Okay. You recently adopted Orthodox Christianity. Is that because you saw that life was going better or worse?
No, it didn't have anything to do with that at all.
Okay. Because I guess I kind of like and Coop's not going to understand this reference, and it's not, but he doesn't need to understand this. I think the way I understand it is most people come from the Cyprian kind of like idea when they adopt Orthodoxy, right? So, yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant Saint Cyprian of Carthage. I was like, what?
Okay, no. Vin. Yes. Yeah, you got it.
And what is that?
So
what is his idea?
So it's kind of like this idea that as we see the downfall of society around us, we're looking for something solid to grab onto.
I mean, maybe that's the case for people. I don't know. Maybe it is. I think it depends on the person.
But I think that's why Coop's observing what he's observing, right? I don't think he's completely off the rails. I think there's something there. I don't think so. Yeah, I think there's something there as to when a society begins to fall, the people begin to like cling to religion.
I mean, again, that's
when they do not have access to the material, then they seek more of the spiritual.
Right. And would that's implied because we see maybe the exacerbation or acceleration of the quote decline of the West, and so
well, it's kind of like
No, I'm saying
have y'all
it has
listened to
directly.
have y'all listened to
it
like
directly-
have y'all listened to Tucker Carlson recently? Like the interviews he's been involved in?
No.
No.
Okay. So he's a Presbyterian, which is like far from the most spiritual of any Christianity, but he's a Presbyterian, and he's continuously talking about how what we're seeing around us with um the the kind of decline of civilization, the way that our society is moving is all spiritual. And it's like, oh, people are starting to become aware that the small movements within society, what no matter how big you find these movements, whether it's like finding Trump guilty of these crimes or whatever, but or UFOs or whatever, like people are finding that these are spiritual elements within our society. And so I think people are looking as things decline, as they become less secure in their own lives, they're looking for something more spiritual, more secure to hold on to, and they just find that spiritual element in
Right.
as something to be more solid, like long term. I guess would be
Coop, you want to take that one? I felt like I was just talking a
I
whole
would
bunch.
love to take. I would love to take that because isn't it amazing that it's happening at the same time that we have a financial decline where people are watching their savings and retirement disappear and they're finding it hard to buy food.
I think we lost you.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I thought you cut out. Sorry.
No, that was my point. That this seeking for spirituality also happens to come with a decline in the access to material things. Strangely, at the same time.
So
And even the threat of further removal of access to material things, right? And we also at the same time have a social upswell in the interest in spirituality, which relates to what I was trying to say in the contemporary world. We see that nations that suffer more from poverty also tend to be more religious in filling some sort of hope, right? Necessity for the individual psychologies within those societies in order to have the endurance to continue, right? It's almost a survival mechanism, is going back psychologically to seek for a spiritual reason to continue, right?
So maybe, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. Let me just, for the sake of trying to make an entertaining conversation continue, let's just assume that the opposite of that is true. That the
What is the
baseline, I'll tell you, the baseline is a connection with the supernatural, with the spiritual, that we are innately meant to have. And that, just posit this as an argument, that has been lost because of the fixation on the material gains. And as we are rising above the false need for those things to be a part of our life, we are refinding what is innate and natural in us from prior, which is the belief that there is something out there that's bigger than us.
Okay.
Why should that not be just as equally possible as the opposite?
Well, you'd have to describe to me as to why an individual would necessarily need to have a sense of spirituality if all of their positive social, psychological, and physical needs were taken care of.
Well, I think there's a presupposition there that the positive, physical, and material, whatever, somehow is above the spiritual. That is an assumption.
No, I'm saying that it's just a baseline, right? Like, I don't know, if I had a healthy family, I had relative food security for myself and my family. I lived in a predictable society where my kids could play outside and I wouldn't worry about anything happening to them or any negative temptations, and that other people were also looking out for them, and that in general, we had a very good, stable, high trust society, and economy was wonderful and great, and I had a good and healthy relationship with my wife. Uh, then why would I need to seek a higher sense of spirituality, or why would there need to be one, period? Right?
No, I'm glad you worded it that way, because what I'm saying is the opposite of that. I'm saying that what you're calling a baseline is a distraction, and what you're calling a searching is the baseline. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm saying, why bother to search if you had the baseline?
No, I'm saying it's not a search. I'm saying, like, you can say, for example, that hunger.
You're saying it's a state. It's a state.
No.
A state of existence. A state of existence that has been removed.
I think I would take it further and say that it is existence.
Okay, so spirituality is existence.
Yes.
Okay. So how come there is existence without spirituality?
What do you mean?
Well, there are things and people that exist without spirituality.
Yeah, right? That's why I think if you're, no, I'm not saying you're doing this, but I say the king's you, like the royal you. If you're looking at something like, quote, religion as a tool in the tool belt and not the default state, then there is no paradigm from which what I'm saying would make any sense. And to you, I think it doesn't make sense what I'm saying. And probably to a lot of people, probably to most people listening to this, it wouldn't make sense either. But within the paradigm, now Buddhism has its paradigm, Hinduism has as the basically the only true pagan religion that still exists, has a paradigm. Orthodox Christianity has a paradigm. Within that paradigm, our doctrines are things that are assumed to be the case within the paradigm. One of those would be the doctrine of the fall, post fall, right? And the fall within the paradigm explains exactly why you would have a discrepancy like you're explaining right now. Right now, I'm not saying that means that somebody should just go immediately become an Orthodox Christian. I'm saying it provides an account, whereas the opposite materialist view provides no account one way or the other for any of those things.
So there are many ways to approach this concept of the fall, as you mentioned it, right?
And yeah, probably. Because well, not to me, but in general, yeah.
In general. So I would posit that the fall is simply a representation of the burgeoning of consciousness in humanity from an animalistic state of existence. So the development of the conceptual mind to a point of recognition of a potential other, right?
I mean, it sounds like that's what you're saying. You think, yes.
So if that is the case, then it is simply the difference between a computer, for example, the difference between a computer and artificial general intelligence. And that if you were going to refer to the fall would be it coming from just a basic computer that is simply doing the will of its master into something that had a will and conceptualization capability of its own.
Right, except that we, as Orthodox Christians, we would have a different conceptualization of the word will than that. But yeah, I think in the general, again, I don't know if you have a term for your paradigm or however you would, and you say you kind of, it's a little fluid and you kind of adapt and learn and grow. That's fine. I'm not trying to peg you or put you in a box.
Well, it's generally about what I perceive the paradigms as being, right? And I perceive the paradigms of religions as being investing everything in this life towards another life that is based in the spirit.
Yeah, that's not
after one is given over the mortal coil.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense within that paradigm. Sure. The Orthodox Christian paradigm does not hold to that. That is, I mean, there's a lot of that in some different world religions. I'm pretty comfortable with Hinduism and Buddhism. I'm not a scholar in those areas. Western Christianity has very different views on the things that Orthodoxy has views on. And the fall, Okay, let me try to word it this way. From an Orthodox point of view, the point is not to earn our way into the afterlife. Now, we could take qualms with the word earn, whatever we want to put in there. The goal is not the afterlife, because in Orthodox Christianity, as all first millennium Christianity prior schism would believe, minus some aspects post Ephesus in the Coptic churches or the Eastern, the Oriental churches, the idea that human beings were always created to be here in this reality, always meant to be here. And we set ourselves back in the fall from our ability to find our full potential in this creation. We were created to be in this creation. And what we think of as the eschaton, or, you know, the end days, or quote heaven, is only conceptualized the way that you're describing it because of the fall, but it isn't even really that either. Because, for example, the Roman Catholic idea of the eschaton is to stare into the TV screen that is the essence of God for all eternity. Protestantism, who the hell knows, because there's 30,000 different versions of it and they all believe different things. But Orthodoxy would say, and probably the way I can be sure I'm not saying something heretical right now, would be that our idea of the eschaton is just the original version of where we are right now, prior fall. So that Adam, not me, but the biblical Adam, man, was taken from where he was created and placed into creation. Right.
So
That's
the recreation of Eden on earth with Christ as king over all in a material form.
No.
Okay.
The idea that man was always to be a steward of this creation, the very one we are in right now. Right. And our inability to find a connection with something as simple as other human beings or animals or
no, I see that. I get that. I'm just talking about the end goal. Like, whereas like you were saying, Protestant and Catholicism, your spirit goes to heaven, rock and roll. What happens after death in Orthodoxy?
The end goal is not real. I mean,
it's not the end goal, the end result.
The end result is
faithful Orthodox Christian.
Yeah, the end result is called theosis, which has some analogs in Eastern religions, not in Western religions.
Right. Well, even by its name, it kind of gives away what it is, right?
I hope it does.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Step down from apotheosis.
No, it's the opposite of apotheosis.
Okay.
The opposite. Yeah. Not a step down.
Yep.
Yeah. So the idea is you're coming back to your pre-fallen nature by acting a particular way. And I think, if I'm hearing you correctly over the last hour or so, the acting that way is ultimately the problem. Is that a good, maybe, middle ground we find ourselves in?
Okay. So I'm asking, is that in a new material form, or?
I don't think that's exactly spelled out that way.
Okay.
Like, what exactly?
So what happens to people that are dead now that were practicing Orthodox? Like,
well,
where do they exist?
Yeah. I want to be as fair to this as possible without being like a practiced theologian in response to you, but I want to be fair to your question. Like, for example, and I don't want to straw man you either. Like, the idea that I intellectually decided to be an Orthodox Christian, however many years ago, guarantees me nothing. It doesn't mean anything, right? Saying that I'm a Christian, being nice to people, shaking people's hands and opening doors for people, doesn't mean anything, right?
Right. Exactly why I'm not a Christian and can't claim to be. Right.
Okay, that's fine.
Even though I'm
not trying to make you one.
Even though I relatively live according to Christian morality. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would probably get that from most of the German philosophers too. They would probably say like, "Oh, well, I mean, I do it," but but that's not the point. Being, the entire worldview itself has to be taken at face value. The reason I say that is because the answers, quote unquote, that Western Christianity would provide to somebody who's challenging them the way you are, there isn't any answers there. And so somebody might not like the answers that Orthodox Christianity would provide within the paradigm, but that's mostly just a matter of opinion. And if we decide that, for example, tomorrow there's a worldview that is explained to me that better explains the reality I live in, then I'll go do that one. I mean, I'm not dogmatically an Orthodox Christian. If somebody could say, well, I have a worldview here, Adam, that explains the reality that you are in every possible circumstance, justification, epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, aesthetics, and they could do a better job than Orthodox Christianity has presented it to me, then you've won me over. I will absolutely do that.
I think I can really simplify things.
Okay.
Where does orthodoxy place your material power to enact results in this world?
What do you mean place it? Like within?
How much value does that have, according to orthodoxy?
My ability to affect the material world?
Yes. In one way or the other.
There's a lot.
Well, what value? A lot of value?
Sure. I mean, a 9.736 out of 10. I mean, I don't know. It's a lot. It's very important. Yeah. Because this is the same reality. The fallen reality is the same reality pre-fall. So what human beings were created to be, we are still that. We are just disconnected from that meaning because of the fall. So everything we do here is sort of a lost version of what we were created to do in the first place. So maybe you could say it's everything. Maybe it could be everything.
So we are lesser than what we were, and the concept is to return us to a state that was.
Nah, I don't know if I could be by lesser. Lesser is a little bit too subjective.
Well, I would say that using the term the fall is very indicative of lesser.
No, I don't think so. I think that's
well, you don't look up a mountain and say this is lower than where I'm at.
Yeah, but we're not talking about
one falls and one falls off of the mountain, right? No, I'm talking about conceptualized, right?
No, it's a bad conceptualization. Yeah, I don't like.
I'm not the one who used the term the fall.
No, but I mean, there's a whole. I mean, I'm not going to bore you guys to death with 2,000 years.
So it's a removal of previous abilities that we had that made us better than we are now. The concept is to return to that, right?
Yeah, I want to be as fair to this as I can. But let me try to take those words and try to.
I'm just trying to use logic, right?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
If the concept is that there is a doctrine that is going to return a person previous to what is conceptualized as a fall in order to give them back things that have been taken away from them by whatever entity or circumstance or situation, right? Then that means that the individual without what they used to have is lesser than now what they were previous to that. That just seems logical.
It's not metaphysically accurate, though.
Well, and that's the case. If you have to subscribe to a metaphysics, right, in order to make an appeal to a material existence, right?
Yeah, but your worldview denies. But the problem
disconnect between the two, and that the connection between the two is not being logically made so that it can empower individuals in order to make any changes. Right?
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is within the paradigm, we can't trust our logic because the logic is also fallen. So you can't trust that you would know what you're commenting on in that system without the system. And the reason
this is exactly my point.
The reason this is important,
not trusting in logic, right? Is what.
But you can't. But Coop, the problem is you're hold on. Wait, hold on. The problem here is that the worldview, the materialist worldview, cannot provide an account for logic. There is no way.
I'm not inducting myself into this conversation very much because both of y'all are way smarter than I am. But
fun.
No, this is awesome. This is awesome. I'm getting a lot out of it. But I do want to make sure that all the concepts are like kind of like drawn out. So if we could just like, please just each of y'all just one at a time.
I am really trying to keep this in line, Tommy, with what I'm trying to say is that the religions tend to offer a doctrine that weakens our effect on the material world around us and that
I
things have
get
not and
that.
things have not gotten better because of adherence to religion. That
I
generally things have started to decline with regards to degeneracy in the world, despite the fact that we have all of these religions that people subscribe to.
well,
And I would suggest that that's because all of these religions have a doctrine that say, be submissive, and you're going to get something better, or you're going to have something returned to you, or you're going to go to heaven, or whatever, that is not related to the material reality that humans face. And that
right.
us subjecting
Here
ourselves to these doctrines allow for us to constantly decline and degenerate, right?
all
But
right.
the
So
problem there,
here's the issue. Here's the issue.
okay.
Because I do podcasts regularly. So here's the issue is when you are both talking and you are both saying something that is so beyond the concept of what most people like are experiencing in their life because they don't think at this level. You're actually putting them at imposition, and you're making it
I'm
very
trying to keep it
difficult
really
for
basic.
them to understand. So what we got to do is we got to cover the context that you're talking about. We have to cover it, but we have to do it in such a way that everybody's talking one after the other, and so that the audience can kind of conceptualize what's going on. No matter what
Right.
whether they want to agree with you or disagree with you, that doesn't matter. It's just y'all, you two are y'all because y'all think at this level so constantly. You don't understand that most people aren't at this level, and so you kind of got to give a little bit of a leeway for people to catch up and to
Okay.
keep up with what y'all are doing.
Let me answer that, Tommy. Okay. Um, I can utilize logic and rational process because it is something that people can follow and understand. But when a person says that logic itself is eroded, right, and makes an appeal to a metaphysical,
Well, don't
at,
no,
at that, well,
don't
what I'm
argue the
saying is
point with
that,
me. That's not where
what
I'm
I'm saying
getting
is
at.
that,
All I'm
but
trying to
what
get
I'm
at
trying to
is,
say is I'm trying to keep things on a rational and logical sense so that people can follow along with it.
but
But
that's not how life works. But
when
that's not how the
metaphysical
world works.
aspects,
But that's not how the
then
world works. You understand this. You know that the world is not always logical or rational.
no,
So
no, no.
like
But as
don't
far as
argue the
trying to
point with
keep,
me. The reason
I'm just
you and
trying.
Adam are talking is because you two can bounce off of each
Okay,
other
Adam,
these
Adam,
concepts.
I'm with you,
Adam.
man. We can just keep going. I'm good. We're good.
Hold
We
on,
have to we have
hold
to
on.
utilize
I'm not trying to
we have
start a
to
fight
utilize
here.
logic. No, 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 me either. I'm just trying to express my point that I am trying to keep things to an understandable level, utilizing something that is readily accessible to anybody that is listening, which is a logical process. Now, to
Right,
have
right.
logical process pulled out from under me, right? And to take the conversation to a metaphysical level, then we're getting into the weeds that nobody's going to understand. I'm perfectly willing to discuss the metaphysical. I just don't think anybody else is really interested in it, right?
Well, I
Well,
mean,
And what I'm trying to describe are
give me
material.
1 second because my issue is not the content. My issue is not the content. Now we're like where we're going content wise, we're probably going to have to stop in the next 30 minutes, which is fine. And we can always pick it up in another conversation. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have an issue with the content. The content's great. I love where the conversation is going. All I want to make sure is that we're not like continuously talking over each other because once that starts happening, especially with such high level conversation, people just start losing it because they don't understand what's happening. They don't understand the conversation. They don't understand where the content's going.
oh yeah,
So
we
Okay.
can
I don't
we can stop.
mind that the content is high level. All I'm
Okay.
asking is that we're just mindful to not speak over each other and
Sure.
not get caught up on that. That's all I'm
All right.
asking. I
All right.
like y'all are both like right in line. You're doing exactly what I thought y'all were gonna do. Actually, I'm going to have to go back and listen to this because y'all are talking about things I didn't think y'all were going to talk about, honestly.
We were rolling pretty. You want to pick up where we were rolling, Coop?
Yeah, let's go, man. I just want to make sure that
the
people
rail
are
the
able to keep up, man.
I have to say though, like I'm not on any social media or anything, and I'm not involved in any discussion groups or anything. Like a conversation like this is something that happens once a year for me, if I'm lucky. So I've got to say that to you. I'm okay. Thank you.
Well,
very
it
much.
might happen 2 or 3 times this year if you're lucky.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah,
no, this
I
is
think,
awesome, man. Y'all are doing great. I just want to make
Tommy,
sure that we're able to like keep the audience engaged, man. That's it. That's all I'm trying to do.
Dude, it's your show for sure. I mean, I would, if it's me, I kind of have some faith in the audience, man. Like if they could Google stuff or reach out to us or what, I wouldn't.
Well,
I think it's going great. I think it's
well because when y'all start getting in these little like, I wouldn't call them spats. I don't know what to call it, but when y'all are going to back and forth,
Fun
and
conversation.
it's a couple of sentence backs and forth, it kind of loses me. I'm kind of losing where we're at as far as like the context goes. So
can I try
and I'm
to...
just aware that if I'm kind of losing what's happening in the conversation, other people are going to be losing it as well.
Can I try to change my perspective here to
yes,
help?
sir. I'm going to put myself back on mute. I'm no longer involved.
No, it's cool, man. It's your show, dude.
Yeah.
I think the problem with getting into a deep discussion of the metaphysics, which I think is where I didn't really want to go, but the conversation led us there, is again from a presuppositional level. And maybe it'll help if we could iron this out for the audience or for all of us here. That the idea that I presented earlier, that the fundamental paradigm level, the thing that has to be the case in order for the rest of the paradigm to be true, is always going to be presumed or circular. Would that be something does that make sense how I presented that to Coop, or would you disagree with that?
I would suggest like it would be a presumption, and the presumption that I would have is that consequence and result, right, have to be the basis for the presumption of a reality, right? Do you follow me on that? And
Maybe
that circular arguments, right, are just semantics and pedantics, typically, right?
So I don't mean circular arguments. I agree with you on that. I mean at a paradigm foundational level. For example,
at a paradigm foundational level, there is no exception to a circular concept, right?
Okay, so we think to be in agreement.
Yes, like the best argument for God is actually circular interdependence upon existence, right? Ibn Sina.
I think
what you're kind of referring to. Right?
So I think that the cosmological argument, or the Kalam cosmological argument, I think is a bad argument personally.
Okay,
it's better than the ontological argument.
To me, it represents the circular concept, though. That's okay.
I was pointing out. Sure, as an example of circularity.
Not as with regards to it. Yeah, not with regards to its validity.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So I would also say that, and again, I hope with these generalizations, I'm not looking at you because I just met you, so I don't know everything about you. But it from the, let's take your general atheist, Matt Dillahunty type, or Sam Harris type. Everybody.
No, God, don't. Oh God, no.
Okay, what is there a better one?
Oh God.
Is there's any internet that isn't in tuned into the same things you are?
An internet atheist that is.
Fair enough. Okay, so that's even better. So we can both dislike these people. This type of person would try to make the argument that there is some kind of classical foundationalism, true first belief from which everything else could branch off of, or something like, for example, logic. Logic has to exist because we're being logical. And let's say it's a classical empiricist, David Hume type or something like that. they'll say, well, everything comes from the senses, and then everything's got to come in first from the senses. And you'll say, well, is logic in the senses? No, I can't. I just have to assume that's the case. But as a David, I know you're not David Humean, whatever type, but the assumption with David Hume is that, well, we have these categories and they just are, and we can't demonstrate them empirically, but they're useful and we can use them in a sense like that.
I'm saying that like I have to cut you off, because like this is going from an incorrect framework. I
was trying to help the audience, not you necessarily.
Okay. I would suggest that logic is not from that at all, and the type of logic that I present does not have a lineage based upon that, right? Logic is more based upon neuroscience than anything else, right?
I mean, was there the concept of logic prior to neuroscience?
There was a concept of logic before the concept of logic, and that the concept of logic is just an observation of a reality, right?
So how would somebody, for example, prove logic without using logic?
One would just have to exemplify logic.
Right. So it would just be logic, just is.
Yes, it just
but
is.
That's what I mean by circularity at a particular
paradigm.
That's
what I was saying. That's what I was saying. I agree with circularity, but
not circular arguments.
Not circular arguments. We have to have a presumption, right? That therefore logic has a requirement within our lives as it is representative of observations of reality. And that's where we butted heads on you saying like the metaphysical aspect of logic itself is corrupted, right? And therefore
within
logic
my world
cannot be depended upon, right?
Within my world.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're on the same foot, right?
Yeah, a lot of that was just like Tommy said, to maybe pull the audience back into the conversation. Yeah. And then from that, again, to maybe pull them into the conversation we're having a little bit more, there are things like identity over time, language, numbers, right? Things that you can't put under a microscope and point to. Causation would be another one from the Humean, like causation. You can't point to causation and be like, there it is right there.
Right. They're the ephemeral. Aspects.
Yeah. So I think just for the audience, when I'm talking about at a paradigm level, everything ends up in circularity. There's always going to be something that's presumed or assumed to be the case in order for everything else in the worldview to flow. The reason that I think this is important to demonstrate is it removes the general, not yours, the general atheist argument against, quote, religion as having like no basis in reality. Because if we and maybe you don't like this argument, you can let me know. The very thing that we're presuming is the foundational starting point in something like Orthodox Christianity, which is, of course, God the Father, the arche, right, the creator, is just as circular a starting point as anything else: logic, numbers, identity over time, causation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I think
God does not have the same representation as an observation of logic on Earth.
Well, and here's where I would take it into, now that we've maybe established that for the audience, take it into a more detailed discussion with you. I would say that without a proper, not just but a proper concept of the Godhead, there is no account for how those things are not, or I'm sorry, there is no account, there's no justification for how any of those other things could exist at all. And the way that, for example, Willard Van Orman Quine points this out in Two Dogmas of Empiricism in the 50s, he likens all of those things to the gods of Homer. He says they're all fairy tales. They're all made up. And we shouldn't even try to justify anything that we're talking about. We should just basically tinker around in the brain and play with psychology and not even worry about justifying things. And I'm not saying you're doing that. But what I'm getting at is...
Can I interrupt both of y'all just for a second? All right. So we're an hour or 40 minutes. How long do y'all want to go with this particular episode? Because we can always do another one.
Yeah, I'm sure we could.
That's up to you, Tony.
Yeah, it's your show, dude.
I'll sit here and hang out as long as y'all want to. I'm just chilling. It's like I got a front row seat to a heavyweight fight.
Well,
Like,
let me
right.
end. I'll wrap up my idea, and then if Coop wants to continue on, we'll just follow his train of thought post this.
Yeah, because we can go as long as y'all want. I don't have an issue with it.
We should probably wrap it up within like 20.
Yeah,
30
I
minutes.
just don't want to keep y'all any longer than y'all.
I just wanted to make the point that what I stress about anybody's paradigm isn't does somebody arbitrarily or haphazardly just sort of cling on to the supernatural as like their baby blanket that makes them feel comfortable. It's does the worldview that whomever, the theist, the non-theist, the agnostic, the whatever, does the worldview that person subscribes to, does it provide an account? Does it provide, first of all, is it coherent and cohesive internally and externally? Does it provide a justification for things like causation, identity over time, induction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And does it provide any kind of a way to create an ontological standard for ethics and aesthetics? And I think that's just, I don't believe that a non-theist worldview can provide an account for those things. And that's not a problem. It just, what it turns into from my point of view, it just turns into can you make a better argument for your position than somebody else? But there is no actual demonstrable truth in anything that you could say, really.
Okay. Could you provide for me an answer as to why, right? Other than why actually those things are necessary to the average person to improve their lives and improve the world around them, that they have to provide a rationale for all of these complex concepts that you're describing.
Sure,
like the average individual does not need an accounting for everything, right?
Well, they do
not need an accounting for logic. No, they don't. They don't require.
I'll tell you why
they don't consider these things.
Okay. No, I know they don't consider them. That doesn't mean they don't need them. Right. Just because.
No, no. Come on. Hear me out. They might need them as being something that exists in itself, but it's not relevant to them. And therefore, it's not relevant to the greater whole in the sense of the environment that is being created by their inaction or actions, right? So in other words, a person can be motivated by something as simple as being hungry without understanding that there is a greater rationale, perhaps globally, as to why they're hungry, and they will generate behaviors that are going to fill their stomach as opposed to solve the greater overall problem as to why they might be lacking food. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying. I disagree.
What you're trying to say is that everybody should be concerned about these greater ephemeric ontological successive conceptualizations that build upon a platform or a basis for providing explanation, right? But most people don't think like that, and most people don't act like that, and most people aren't motivated by those concerns. But what those people do and are motivated by are what make up the environment in the world around us, right? So it's trying to find the appeal to those individuals so that they can change things in this environment, understanding that they do not need for themselves an accounting for why there is logic, why there is this, why there is that, right? I think that that's the disconnect between the intellectual cadre and the average individual, and therefore more simple rationales and reasons have to be provided for behavior that are more root and based in what we understand of a basic material humanity, in order to motivate them to a point where they can fully understand or have the leisure to grasp onto concepts such as the accounting for why.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand that's your point. Yeah.
And that's why I'm suggesting that these world religions, all religions, have had this concept of submitting the self and the material concepts and and world around them for something greater, and that you have a societies that are desperate enough to seek a hope and be willing to sacrifice what they perceive they don't even have to begin with for something better, and therefore give up everything here and empower those that do have power to continue with their abuse of it.
So I absolutely understand that point of view.
And that's what Nietzsche was saying, was that Christianity provides nothing but a succor and weakness that is taken advantage of by an elite that hold to paganistic ideals and concepts and the will to power in order to keep control over the plebiscite general. And that Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and all of the other forms of religion teach greater population and psychological overlay that the material is shit. You should give it up. Don't worry about it. Move on. There's something better for you. And and that's that. Like,
I mean, as I mentioned already, that is not Orthodox Christianity's paradigm. It is not about giving up things. It is not about submission. It is not about the afterlife. But that's maybe a conversation for another day. Maybe.
Has Orthodoxy ever conquered anything?
Yeah, Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire for 1,000 years. Yeah.
Right. Do you know what understand
Russia?
Russia? Do you know what the term Byzantine means? When it's referred to in politics?
I mean, it's the previous civilization before Constantinople was built. Yes.
Yeah, but they were taken over by.
Who are you talking about?
Islam. The Ottoman.
Yeah,
Empire.
But you didn't ask me, did it last forever? You asked me,
no,
what
I'm not
did it
asking
take
if it
over and
lasted
build?
forever.
You just moved the goalposts.
No, I didn't mean to move the goalposts.
There's 1,000 years of Christian rule.
I didn't mean to move the goalposts in that sense.
Okay.
I was more making a point of it was taken over by another religion that also teaches to submit. So it's just
Orthodox Christianity does not teach to submit.
Well, it was taken over by a religion that teaches to submit.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it was. Islam is very much about submission, right in the word. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the point. It motivates peasants to a belief system where they give up their material life, right?
I mean, that's what Islam does. Yeah.
Yeah, and Christianity too. The Crusades.
But I've just explained multiple times why that's not the case.
In Orthodoxy?
That's correct. So
what does Orthodoxy represent, like I say, with regards to what it offers its individuals as its adherents? Like, we were trying to get into that, weren't we?
I mean, at the risk of repeating myself, I mean, I did go into this before.
I mean, without going to the metaphysical. So your average.
I mean, why do I have to have the constraints on me to not do that? Why can't I just do that?
No, I'm asking you. I'm just asking you. So let's say you go to heaven in Catholicism and various Protestant faiths. You reach nirvana through Buddhism. Hinduism. You work yourself up through this chain of birth and rebirth. What does Orthodoxy offer its adherents?
Can I phrase it in a different way? Because I think I know what you're asking, Coop, but I think that
it's pretty simple in my opinion. Yeah, it's very simple. If you're Orthodox and you die, what happens to your soul? What happens to your soul if you're Orthodox and you die?
Right. Adam, I think this is actually kind of like an interesting kind of question, because Orthodoxy is not known in our kind of stratosphere, right?
I mean, clearly.
Right. And so people kind of understand what Protestantism brings. They understand what Catholicism brings. They understand what Islam brings, but they don't understand, like, how does Orthodoxy address the afterlife?
No, I understand.
And that's a different, that's a different.
That's what I've been asking, though. Is right. What does it offer? What is it?
Right. That's why I engaged, because I felt like we were asking the same question over and over again, and it just wasn't
Return
understood what
describe
was
whether or not
being
it's in a
asked.
spiritual form or a material form.
Right.
Spiritual form or material form of return to or return of things that were lost in the fall. But that doesn't
Right.
describe
Right.
I need to answer the question.
Yes,
or we're
sir.
not going to get it.
Please.
So this is not what I really wanted to talk about, because I am not like a theologian that should even be talking about this stuff. But
yes, sir. Let me just put it. Let me put a preference.
I mean, I'm going to have to answer the poor guy here at some point.
Let me just put a preface on this.
It's very important.
Adam and Coop are just my good friends, and I wanted to get into a deep conversation. And I was like, these two guys would be so good together just to have a conversation. So what Adam's saying is not, it's not going to be biblical or theological. This is not going to save you. Like, what we're talking about here is we're just getting into the outlining of what things mean. Hopefully that helps, Adam.
I have to establish this. It's important for me to understand what orthodoxy offers the individual, right? That is the equivalent of what other religions offer the soul to their practitioners.
Yeah, and I can try to explain to you the best I know, or best I can.
I just want a simple explanation. I do not. I want an explanation that
it's going to be easier for me to give it to you if one of you, if both of you don't.
Driving down the road in the truck, and he hears, okay, well, in Orthodoxy, this is what happens to my soul when I kick the bucket, and if I've been a good Orthodox boy, then this is kind of what I can expect.
Yeah, I'm not gonna give you an elevator pitch on orthodoxy, because that's condescending and ridiculous. I'm not gonna do that. But if you want me to,
it's not on orthodoxy. It's on result. I'm not talking about the process.
You asked me a very specific question about 20 minutes ago, which is what happens to the soul after death, and the answer, as far as I understand, let's go with something. So I need to get an answer out here. So it's how I understand it is, there's an intermediate state where your soul waits for the bodily resurrection that occurs at the eschaton. That's what I know. That's all I know. I don't expect that to even make any sense to anybody, and it wasn't the point of the argument in the first place. But I think it answers your question.
No, it's not that it's the point of the argument. It's that it's part and parcel to my making my argument, right? So the entire point is that it's not what exactly happens, it's that something happens, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, something happens.
So that something happens to your soul. So there is a presumption that there is an afterlife. Yeah, and that in that afterlife, you will gain a reward having reached that afterlife, correct?
I think reward is a weird word, but I guess sure.
Well, reward would be the result of behaving properly according to the edicts of a religion or a faith, or acting.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you eat a banana, you're full, and there's a reward because
you get the reward of you get the reward of the digestion of the nutrients that the banana provides.
Right. So anyway, my ultimate argument here isn't that. It isn't that. I don't think there's anything that I could say to a human being theologically about any religion, including my own, that would make any sense to them outside of the entire paradigm. And I'm not particularly qualified to do that, nor do I want to anyone ever. Right. What's important to me is not I decided to believe in God, therefore I'm saved, therefore I win. I think that's a silly argument, and I'm not making it, nor would I ever.
Nor would I ask you, and nor have I asked you.
And the point I'm trying to make is, you've brought up a lot of words, terms, and concepts in this conversation, like better, decline, degeneracy, problem, appeal, change, improve, have to be, something greater, sacrifice, empower, decline, right? And I'm telling you that in a materialist worldview, none of those things mean anything at all. They're just figments and the gods of Homer. They don't mean anything. They're just
right, without an initial premise of an authority of a god defining what those things are.
Yeah.
Right, which is the basis of theology, right? Is that a god is the person who provides those definitions.
Maybe not all of it. I don't know if like Western Christianity makes any kind of an argument.
Right. Can I ask you both? Can I ask you both
a question?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know, and I want to get an answer from both of you on this question. Philosophically, where are we in this conversation?
Philosophically, I'm saying that all of those greater concepts don't mean anything, in the sense that all of the ephemeral doesn't mean anything without a material sense or basis with which to perceive or put them into context. Right? So simply saying these ephemeral things, as important as they might be, and as important as they might be as forming a basis for being able to define these words, right? It doesn't mean that these words do not have meaning. It just means that they do not have definition. And in that sense, an ephemeral domination, right, over a material sense is what has caused a disempowerment of individuals over the material, in the sense that they have placed a value on the ephemeral above the material, in the same sense that a person would be almost misanthropic, in the sense of not seeing human as being important to this world at all, simply because there is no reason for us to, other than ought. Right? Like to me it's silly. It's like, well, if there aren't humans there to experience this world, then this world doesn't technically exist to the concept of humanity, and therefore that is what provides import to human existence. Just like the material is what provides import to the conceptualizations of ephemeralism, because without the material basis, there wouldn't be any pondering of anything ephemeral. Right?
Right.
If you give over that material, then ephemeral doesn't mean anything.
Right.
We all right, Adam, where are we philosophically in this conversation? Where are we at?
You're asking, like in an idea sense, where we are?
Yeah, like so somebody listening that's trying to keep up and trying to.
I don't think that Coop has provided a justification for the ability to know anything at all. And this is what I mean. When I say something like,
I'm saying that there doesn't need to be.
Hold on.
I know you.
Let's see what Adam has to say, because this might help us a couple of weeks down the road. We can engage again.
But honestly, saying that I haven't provided something I never intended to or wanted to or think I should provide.
I know that you don't. I know that you don't. I know that.
Right.
I know that. Okay. I know. My point is, right? For example, there's different levels of logic, right? We're doing like literal logic, P, V, R, right? There's the idea that I could say, there's a water bottle in front of me. That's a different, and you know this, Coop, right? There's a difference between saying there's a water bottle in front of me and saying, I know there's a water bottle in front of me. Those are two completely different statements, right? The first statement is not a metaphysical statement. The second statement is a metaphysical statement. Now, if I'm hearing you right, which I think I am, you're saying there's no need to provide any kind of metaphysical statement because as we see is what it is. Is that fair?
More or less, yes. And that's what matters to the vast majority of individuals that form the world around us.
Sure. And that's what I was trying to get to earlier.
Yeah, and that's not an unfair way of looking at the world. Like, just to be clear to the people that are listening, that's not unfair to say, well, the vast majority of people view the earth as flat. Whether or not they are flat earthers, they act as if the earth is flat, right? I mean, that's basically what he's saying. Am I correct?
I mean, maybe they do.
I would not use that example.
Yeah, that's
well, I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be silly just to make it easy. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
I would say that Coop has done a very good job of explaining exactly the same thing that I'm explaining, and we are in agreement of, well, we're at least in agreement on his worldview, right? I know that I'm in agreement with the way he has described his worldview makes sense to me from the point of view of his worldview. The only thing I would say, and it doesn't have anything to do really with the intricacies of salvation or any of that stuff. That's all like important. Obviously, it's very important, but to this particular discussion, it really isn't. All I'm trying to demonstrate is, from now my point of view, what I'm hearing is a litany of presuppositions and opinions that are just as valid in that worldview as the opposite world opinions, right? That there is no reason that everything Coop is saying, you couldn't just say the opposite and from within that worldview have as much epistemological certitude of your position in direct opposition to his position, which to your everyday human being who's just wandering around, not worrying about any of this stuff, matters, because all of these conflicting worldviews that are all based in materialism, all of these conflicting worldviews that are just as valid as others within the place of ideas, are confusing these people on a daily basis into not knowing what to do, like, at all. And this is creating the quote meaning crisis, the Jordan Peterson meaning crisis, the thing that conservatives and, you know, libertarians and whomever, or perennialists or traditionalists, are latching onto to see the problem. I'm saying that this worldview that's being demonstrated is the problem that they're trying to fix with the worldview that's causing the problem. That's what I'm trying to say. It has nothing to do with the ins and outs of salvation or souls or anything.
And I'm saying
that's fine.
That never had anything ins and outs of salvation had nothing to do with my point. The point was that all religions were offering it, right? Offering salvation in exchange for material, in exchange for material force, right? That is able to be applied by individuals. And that individuals that take a salvation offering from a religion are doing so at the expense of their material force to affect this world.
Right. And I pointed out a couple of times that Orthodox Christianity does not possess that.
I understand you said that as orthodoxy. I'm talking about all religions, though. Like, and when you say that orthodoxy offers you a state of limbo before an assessment of your return to, or the eschaton, right? That is also the same offering as heaven or nirvana. It's the same thing. As long as there's an offering in an afterlife, right? In order to generate a material behavior prototype, right? And I say prototype because, like, really, who knows what it's going to create in death? Like, therefore, agnosticism. I don't know what's going to happen after death.
Right.
Only religionists say that they know what's going to happen after death, right?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen to us individually.
No, they believe.
Well, all right. So
but here's the closer here, Tommy, and then we can bow, right?
No,
my point
is fine, man. I just don't want to keep out too much longer. Like,
before we get into closing, just the wrap up here from my point of view is, let's assume all of that is true that you just said about quote religions in general, whatever. I'll buy it, right? We'll assume that's true.
Sure. So what is true? Let's make that definitive statement. The religion that religions are offering, right? A state beyond life that is greater than the life that they have now, in return for behaving in a specific way that tends towards a submission to something, right, that is ephemeral and not related to the material, in the sense that they enforce their own will through the material, but instead they enforce or enact the will of an ephemeral concept.
perfectly worded. From an Orthodox point of view, I disagree with that as a description of orthodoxy, but for the sake of this discussion, I will grant it as the premise. Now,
Okay.
granted that all of what you just said is true, granted that the materialist is in no better position epistemologically to determine anything than anyone you just described. They're equally positioned epistemologically to make the same determinations, except that the materialist cannot provide a justification for any ought or should. And that is the only argument I have.
No, what I'm saying is that epistemology doesn't mean anything when compared to the power to enact the material change.
What do you mean enact material change?
Enact material change. If I have the force to change something in this world, it doesn't matter why, who, or whether or not I'm correct or not correct. The power to do so is held by how much will and force and material power I can exert towards that end.
Wait. Is that hold up. Let me understand this. Is this a Machiavellian argument? Like, is that what we're?
I think it's just a common sense argument. It makes sense.
It's a common sense argument, right?
You have more power than I do.
Whether or not I should move this table, right, from point A to point B isn't dependent upon some ephemeral rationality. It's whether or not I can. And if I can't move this table, if I can't move this table, whatever reason I have or do not have for moving it, I simply cannot move it. That's what matters, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page because, like I said, you two guys are too smart, man. Y'all lose people.
I mean, I don't think so, dude. I think this is.
I think so. Like, no, like for real. Like there are moments in this conversation, but I would stop y'all. Like there were moments in the conversation, I would stop y'all and I'd be like, "Hey, wait, like let's talk about this because I'm not sure I know exactly what you're saying." Like y'all when y'all have philosophy backgrounds and like most people don't do that. Like most people aren't digging into that.
That's the point, really, right?
Right. So sometimes it's like just sounds like gibberish.
Just be glad we didn't start talking about Hegel. That's all I got.
Yeah, y'all can do that. Y'all can do that in the next episode because I want to do this again.
I think,
but we're over 2 hours, and if y'all want to keep going, I'll keep going. I'm here.
I think.
But I think it would be
literally frozen here.
Beneficial for everybody to kind of step back, kind of get their like wits about them, and then come back together and do it again. Because now you know who you're talking to. Both of y'all are kind of like familiar with each other.
Yeah. It's one of the ways you get to learn people, I think, and I don't consider this a debate, it's just a discussion.
No, it's just conversation.
Kind of, because it's without, hours and hours and days and maybe weeks of getting to know each other, you can only go off of, like, I probably could have presented, now that we've talked for 2 hours, I probably wouldn't have started where I started. Right. I feel like we probably wasted 40 minutes, but you're never going to know that until you have the conversation. Right. And now
there's no way I could have known that without having y'all engage in the conversation. Like I had to see what was going to happen, and so like that's what we've been doing this whole time.
Sorry, go ahead.
Tommy, I was messaging you and I was so worried it was going to go off into the weeds because I know that it can so easily, right?
Yeah, but I told you that Adam's a bad motherfucker.
I'm with you guys too on seeing, I think we're all seeing something that resonates with us, whether it's politically or socioeconomically or culturally or whatever. We're all seeing something. And everybody, at least everybody I've talked to, granted it's self-selection because I'm, Tommy's friends or Matt's friends, or we're kind of in the same circles. I think we all want to help or fix it or do something to improve whatever it is that we're seeing. And we might have different approaches, but ultimately I think the same goal. I don't think any of us wants to, slaughter genocidally a group. Like we all want to help people.
Wait, what?
And we're trying to figure out.
Is that an option?
Yeah. I mean,
am I giving enough?
and maybe that is, if the materialist worldview is correct, maybe that is actually the way. Maybe it's Thanos. It's, half the population is gone and everybody thrives. I mean, I don't know.
No, I have to say it's kind of funny. I am the Nietzschean caregiver. Like, I look after elderly and disabled people for a living, and I'm a
Which
Nietzschean.
is beautiful.
Yeah, I made a joke
stoic.
earlier, and I told him to go back to his nursing home, but I was being serious.
So there ultimately, I think there is, whether you're whether you're a materialist, an atheist, a secular humanist, a Christian, or whatever you are, we're all, regardless of our worldview, we're all living, unless you think it's the Matrix, we're all living in the same reality. And I think we at least agree on that. So,
but it's whether or not, to me, it's whether or not that reality is more important than the reality as proposed by a specific group of people that have a faith in something. Yeah. Or whether or not it's actually the reality that we all live in that matters. You see my
it's very hard. It's very hard to engage people that have dynamically different roots of their beliefs, right? And so because you two are so very smart, you're so engaged in philosophy, and that's kind of both of y'all have that in common. It's very rare to find two people that are so smart, so engaged in one kind of ideological idea, kind of mindset, but also think differently from each other and wouldn't have normally talked to each other. That's why I wanted to do this conversation, because I thought it was so important to show that, hey, Coop and Adam are two different people. They come from two different backgrounds, but they both have very similar ideological spectrum. I've never seen you and Batman in the same room together.
Seriously, man. Isn't that a Wittgenstein? That's a Wittgenstein thing, right? Isn't that an analytic philosophy thing where he talks about the referent of Batman and Bruce Wayne, and he talks about sense and referent? Isn't that am I remembering that right? Or is that Frege or one of those guys, one of those weirdos? Anyway, sorry,
but no, it's just the point of having you two guys have that conversation, because it's so important to get those minds operating together, working together.
I think it's hilarious
because there's a debate to be had.
That you said.
Go ahead.
I think it's hilarious, Tommy, that you said, "Oh, getting you two together to have a conversation you wouldn't normally have." And quite frankly, it's a conversation that I wouldn't normally have with anybody, because I don't really talk to anybody.
I'm with
when I told you
it's hard
I told you when I was setting this up, I said Adam can keep up with you, man. Don't worry about it. You'll be all right.
If you would like to, if we do it again, I would probably like to stick more to the philosophical stuff, because I just think it carries less baggage into the conversation, and I'm very well aware that
I think this was a very good way of introducing each other to y'all to each other, because y'all kind of get an idea of how each other thinks. Now
Adam, you do a podcast too?
I sometimes do it. Sometimes.
All right.
When he feels like it.
Yeah. No. Ask Tommy anytime, and I'll show up on your podcast too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, man. You can. Tommy can give you my number or whatever. I don't mind.
Yeah. Other way around. On air. Other way around. Because it'll be your thing. It'll be like, hey, I've got an empty schedule here. I'm going to throw him on, and something's going to happen. Right. And that way you can fill in the brackets, and I'll stick to the brackets, because it'll be your show.
People don't want to hang around and watch us suck each other's dick, so I'm going to stop the recording, but we can keep talking. Seriously.